I never thought a normal Thursday morning could spiral into something that would change how I saw neighbors, justice, and even myself. The air was warm, the kind of heavy Florida air that stuck to your shirt, and I was pacing in my garage rehearsing my notes. In just an hour, I had to brief the state attorney about a sensitive case I was helping prepare. My Harley sat gleaming in the driveway, polished to perfection, catching the sunlight like a diamond in the rough. That motorcycle wasn't just a machine, it was my late brother's dream, something I rebuilt after his accident. Every bolt, every scratch, every roar of its engine carried memories. I couldn't let anything happen to it. I didn't know that in less than 30 minutes, the HOA's self-appointed queen, Karen, was about to bring the weight of the police down on me because of that bike, her entitled son, and her own arrogance. The first shout came from across the street. "Hey, man, let me ride that Harley." It was Karen's teenage son, Josh, a kid with more swagger than sense. He was 17, still young enough to think the world owed him everything but old enough to know when he was pushing boundaries. I looked up, shook my head firmly, and replied, "Not a chance, buddy. This bike isn't a toy." I tried to keep my tone calm, not rude, but firm enough to end the conversation. I had bigger things on my mind than indulging a spoiled teen. But Josh wasn't used to hearing no. His face twisted into the kind of scowl kids get when they think rejection is an injustice. He stomped back toward his house, and for a fleeting moment, I thought the problem was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. Not 5 minutes later, as I was gathering my folders and glancing at my notes one last time, I heard high-pitched yelling outside. Karen's voice carried across the cul-de-sac like nails on a chalkboard. "Who do you think you are, denying my son? He deserves a ride, and you need to respect the community rules." She marched toward my driveway, sunglasses perched on her head, phone clutched like a weapon. Behind her, Josh smirked like he'd summoned the cavalry. My stomach dropped. I didn't have time for this. My briefing with the state attorney could not wait, and the last thing I needed was drama. I raised my hand and said firmly, "Karen, with all due respect, this is my motorcycle. It's not safe, it's not for sharing, and it's certainly not for kids." That only fueled her fire. She whipped out her phone, pressed record, and shouted, "Fine. I'll call the cops. You're threatening me and my son with your gang bike." My Harley, my connection to my brother, was now being twisted into some kind of weapon in her narrative. By the time the police rolled up, I was standing on my porch clutching a briefcase, my chest tight with frustration. 2 squad cars pulled into the cul-de-sac, lights flashing like some kind of staged show. My neighbors peeked through curtains, some even stepping out onto porches, ready for the entertainment. The embarrassment was unbearable. Karen rushed forward, crocodile tears streaming down her face, pointing at me as though I were a criminal. "That man threatened my son. He's keeping dangerous machinery on community property. He's unstable." The officers, professional but clearly weary of this routine, turned to me. One asked calmly, "Sir, do you want to tell me what's going on?" For a split second, I considered snapping. I wanted to yell, to unload the weight of stress and grief I had carried, but instead I took a deep breath and explained. I told them about my brother, about the Harley, about how Josh demanded to ride it and how I refused for his safety. The officers exchanged looks, they knew the type. Karen, meanwhile, kept interrupting, shrieking about HOA bylaws and neighborhood safety. Finally, one officer turned to her and said, "Ma'am, there's no law against owning a motorcycle. And no, your son is not entitled to ride it." That was the first crack in her armor. Her face froze, then twisted into a deeper shade of rage. "I'll take this up with the HOA board," she shouted, storming off with her son trailing behind like a shadow. But the damage was already done. My reputation was on the line, I had lost precious minutes, and my heart still pounded as though I had committed a crime. I somehow made it to the state attorney's office on time, though my voice trembled at first as I delivered my briefing. Yet, as I spoke about justice, about fairness, about accountability, I realized this moment with Karen was part of a bigger pattern. People abuse systems, whether it's an HOA, a neighborhood rumor mill, or even the legal system itself, when they think power protects them. My voice grew steadier, stronger, fueled by what had just happened. By the end of the meeting, the attorney leaned back and said, "That was one of the most compelling briefings I've heard. Thank you for your honesty. Back home, the neighborhood buzzed. Some folks sided with Karen, whispering about that biker. Others came to me privately, shaking my hand and saying they were tired of her antics. The HOA called an emergency meeting. For the first time, I decided not to stay silent. I stood in that stuffy community room, heart pounding but voice clear, and laid out what had happened. I talked about harassment, about how one person's entitlement could waste police resources and divide neighbors. And for the first time, Karen didn't have the crowd behind her. One by one, people began nodding, voicing their own frustrations. The tide had turned. It wasn't an easy battle, but the HOA board finally stepped in, putting Karen on probation, warning her that further abuse of rules would cost her fines and privileges. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was a start. More importantly, I learned something that day: silence in the face of bullying only feeds it. Sometimes, standing up for yourself means standing up for others who are too tired or too afraid to fight. My Harley still shines in my driveway, but now it's more than a symbol of my brother. It's a reminder that some things are worth protecting, no matter how loud the opposition gets. So when people ask me what I took from that day when the cops were called on me over a motorcycle, I tell them this: you don't measure strength by how much you yell or how many rules you twist. True strength is in restraint, in standing your ground with dignity, and in speaking the truth even when it shakes your voice. Karen may still glare at me when we pass, but now she knows, this neighborhood isn't hers to control. And for me, every time that Harley engine rumbles to life, it's a reminder that justice isn't about winning battles. It's about refusing to lose yourself.